centuries ago, welcome to the city, which is part of the world's most Asian championships. My name is Lin Chang, and I'm the China. The season next week will be our friend. The format of this debate is as follows. Each speaker will have 8 minutes to make this speech. After 1 minute, the timekeeping will say the words. After this side, the debaters on the other team will have a point of information to the speaker. Debaters must stand up and wait for a point of information. The speaker holding the floor may choose to accept or decline the debate when it is over. At the 7-minute mark, the timekeeper will again say the words. At the 8-minute mark, the timekeeper will make the double signal. Sorry, at the 7-minute mark, the timekeeper will again say the words. After this sound, no more points of information will be offered for the rest of the speech. At the 8-minute mark, the timekeeper will make a double signal like this. After this sound, the speaker must conclude with the closing seconds. After the 6 main sections, each team will have the opportunity to make a 4-minute advance speech. This will be made by either the first or second speaker on the team. No points of information are allowed during the passage. The opposition will make their reply speech first. Before the debate begins, the audience is reminded to switch off all mobile phones or anything else which might disturb the debate. Should you need to exit or re-enter the room for any reason during the debate, please wait until the end of the speech to do so. In opposition for this debate, we have the team from the Netherlands. Their first speaker is Boris Hosting. Their second speaker is Rumi Galaxy. And their third speaker is Simon Martina. In opposition, we have the team from the United States of America. Their first speaker is Nikki Bolton. Their second speaker is Jasper Carter. Their third speaker is Sun Isak. Their two debaters for this debate are Joshua Park from Peru, Maisha Kulele from South Africa, and Tio Renzia from Singapore. The notion of this debate is the House would not consume art created by people who are committed to deep moral ethics. Without further ado, I invite the first speaker for the competition to open the debate. Please welcome Boris Hosting.
Now, imagine you're in a party and the song of Chris Brown comes up. One of your friends walks over to you and tells you to start the song immediately in passion. What she doesn't know is that you suffer from the same abuse Chris Brown has perpetrated many times against those abused. And what she doesn't know, therefore, is that she sends a signal to you that she finds this song being catchy more important than your harm and your abuse. Moreover, she reminds you then of all the abuse and the hurtful feelings that come with that. Do you think we should continue to turn out sum up and protect victims from this harm. And that's why it comes to the that immoral artists will establish a clear and under this timeline, we reach first of all, I'm going to tell you why consumption consolidates the moral act of artists. Second of all, I'm going to tell you why exposure of this types of art hurts victims. And lastly, my second speaker will argue why artists, and specifically this type of art, creates role models that normalize moral behavior. Before we talk about this section, I just want to clarify the things of this debate. So we think that this debate is not about banning this type of art. We think that we as a wider society take stance and collectively not consume this type of art. What type of art are we talking about? Art in which artists goes to in the past and perpetuate immoral acts. For example, criminal acts like abuse or murder. We're talking about types of art, for example, made by Nazis, also Chris Brown and other types of art, which is a wide definition here, movies, paintings, and music. What we think this is debate about is that we're going to show you in this side of the house, and our main goal is that there are extreme harms to victims because of exposure and consumption of this type of art. We think that if you trade that art with this art being interesting or anything like that, we think that the harm to those who already suffered so many times is always going to outweigh interest. So that's our goal in this debate. Let me get started by the first example of Confronting. When consumption consolidates the moral act of this art, the basic principle behind this argument is that consumption of this art and its merits downplays the moral acts that victims. So let's return to the example I told about. You're still at a party and you hear this song. When people then at that party tell you that they enjoy that art, they indirectly praise the artist because he is responsible for that type of art. We don't think, therefore, that when they praise the type of artist, they're talking about the use of this type of lecture, because the function of consumption is the enjoyment of it. Nobody at this party is going to talk about your like Chris Brown did, talking about how good they find this album. That's also the case not only at a party, but when that album is being discussed by critics in, for example, a music show. We therefore think that you're not to play that immoral act. Why? Because instead of talking about that immoral act, the focus is playing with the artistic merit and that song being catchy. What does that do? That makes it seem as if this immoral act is less important than that song being catchy. What we therefore do is that we say to victims, your suffering is less important than me having a bomb. We think that therefore, even though that girl at that party might have choked, she might have screamed, she might have shouted, but deep down inside of her, she feels the harm of people saying to her, we find that harm to you not important. Why are we even caring about this? But we think this happened not just to one people, but to a wide exposure of people, since these artists are very multiple, and they're in multiple potential. Look, for example, the fact that this one is a multi-million artist, and nobody now is talking about that kind of life. They might say that there are some focus on this one. That was only at the beginning when it happened. Later on, you will find that music and the art itself far more important. What happens in the rest of the house? When we do not consume that art, when we put the radio on, there is no focus on the music and its merit, but there's only focus on other aspects of Mr. Chris Brown's life. The fact that he perpetuated the moral act. We also think that people are going to focus on more of this moral act, since it's the next thing which is interesting about Chris Brown. What does he do now regarding outcomes? But even if the media wouldn't have noticed that, we think that that report, actively saying that it's not important, already kneels down to his victims that it is not important. So the next time Chris Brown comes up, it's not about the catchy tunes, it's about the fact that he perpetuates something wrong, and even if it is, let's go back to you. So let me move on to my second point. But exposure of these pictures hurts the victims. And the basic principle behind this argument is that consumption increases the wider and commercial exposure of this type of art, and therefore reminds victims of harmful memories. What we see, yes, you're on one.
When we have massive consumption, there are lots of people who have better types of discussions. More people know about this abuse, and it sparks more political debate.
I'm really sorry. The type of discussion, as I outlined in our article trial, is not about the moral act of this trial. The discussion is about whether the song is catchy or not. And maybe, as I said also before, only in the beginning that discussion goes, but over time where nobody's talking about this act. But in some cases, let's take one aircraft. Let's say that people know and we discuss it. In a lot of example at the fact that how many a French movie that tried to stole millions upon millions from orphanages, and a lot of people just didn't even know about that. We still consumed the movie. We all liked it, right? We therefore think in those cases we're not going to get that discussion. So let me return to that example in this article. The director of that orphanage movie stole millions of orphanages. When we decide as French people, as Dutch, not to consume that movie, then wider theaters are not going to show it anymore because they can't make any profit. Instead, they're going to make a movie which they can make profit on, something which wasn't made by an artist who was immortal. It also means that maybe it goes underground, right? But that's already less exposure than in the States world where the wider commercial use is there. What does that mean? That means an orphan was kicked out of his orphan house because there was no substance to it. He's no longer confronted with the fact that someone indirectly maybe has caused him to live on the streets is consumptive. Because when he sees that movie, or when he even sees an ad of that movie, or when he sees other people talking to him about it, he's reminded of that act and what happens to him. What does that do? That brings back all the feelings he had about that. It brings back the loneliness he felt when he was in the streets. It brings back the sadness when he knew that he had no longer a home. Because those feelings come back, and we should think, even though they're feelings, it's extensively personal. These are one of the most strongest feelings a person has. And we accept that maybe sometimes we remember what these feelings are sometimes. But it means it's less when there is a constant reminder over a period of multiple years in wider media and public life. We think that's extremely painful. But they might say, you might think, well, it's also interesting, this discussion thing you're talking about, right? Even if the discussion happens, which I already quite, we think that discussion is always going to be less powerful than you extensively feeling hurt every day of your life when you see that movie. That's why, for example, the already banned, or the German government banned Nazi artists in the National Historic Museum because it understood that having a discussion maybe is sometimes less important than people being extensively hurt. Moreover, let's get back to this discussion. This is also the word of the article, right? The interesting about that part is still to be discussed in other means. So even though you are not longer maybe seeing that movie, it's not there, you can still have a discussion about abuse in general through literature, especially if it's historical acts like Nazis. We think those victims have suffered a lot. It's time to stop downplaying their feelings and protect them from harmful memories. And that's why I'm exceptionally proud.
And now to open the case for the opposition of legal.
Today you heard a story from Team Proposition that is deeply concerned about victims and their suffering. But what we tell you in Team Opposition is that the only way for us to end this suffering is to confront the truth. We believe that history is powerful, and that we must understand and recognize evil in order to combat it. Because we believe in confronting the truth rather than avoiding it, it is an honor to propose. In this speech, I'll begin by the points brought up by Team Proposition, and then present our first two arguments. That first, that this art is an important form of historical remembrance, and that second of all, this art allows for closure for victims. Our third speaker will present an argument as to how this art sparks broader discussion of these abuses. So let us begin with what you heard from Team Proposition. Firstly, on their framing, on their definition of art, I would like to note explicitly exclude literature. What I would like to point out is to us, this seems to undermine their principled stance. They argue this art is so terrible that no one should ever carry it, but then they make an assumption for people carrying around literature written by Nazi-provided users. We think the reason they do this is at some level they recognize the importance of these discussions, and that's why they're willing to contradict the principle. We think this definition undermines what they're telling you. Then on their framing of consumption in their first point, what we tell you is they seem to have a very simplistic view of what it is to consume something. They talk about consumption only in the context of buy something to play it publicly and celebrate. What we want to say is we can prove to you that there are multiplicity of other positive ways to consume and use this art for good ends, then that should be grounds for us to win this debate. We think they are unjustifiably narrowing the debate to one sense of the word consumption and refusing to address the broader impacts of this art. Then within this argument, what they say is that no one ever has any conversations about this art. What I would like to remind them is that nearly every time that Chris Brown's name comes up, people do mention his abuses, right? We do still think that this argument about the discussion simply goes away is simply false. We think these discussions do remain. And furthermore, they argue, well, let's just have a discussion about the art. I question you, how often do you talk about Chris Brown without hearing his views, right? If we take away the spark of the discussion won't happen in the first place. This idea that we can simply talk about the issues without any spark is a nice idea, but has no relevance to the way the policy works. Yes?
Chris Brown is still a public figure and still covered by multiple tabloids. Don't you think in that sense we can still talk about him and he's still in the media?
I think the reason why he's in the tabloids is because he produces music that we listen to. I think if you took that away, he wouldn't really be on the news anymore, and we wouldn't have this spark for discussion. Then what we say is that, of course, we don't necessarily stand for, say, buying Nazi art and shoving it in front of face your Jewish friend, right? Of course, you should be sensitive about the way you consume art, but that's very different from never consuming art in the first place, right? We think that perhaps if you're listening to Chris Brown's music, you should be aware of the potential harms it might have to people in your party. Yet, we should also understand the intense value that this art has to some people, especially victims. And I'll be addressing that in my subsequent arguments. Then, briefly on they bring up this example of drawings that we didn't know were forging. Well, I have to say, this doesn't make any sense. Right? If we didn't know someone was doing something wrong, then how could this house choose not to consume their art, right? Obviously, we're talking about people that we know they're committing crimes. I don't know how they do that. Then, on their second point, what they say is that this exposure is bad. But what I'm going to show you throughout all of our subsequent arguments is why this art can be valuable to you, and why we can't simply say we would never choose to consume this art, right? If we can show you a multiplicity of reasons why this art is consumed for good reasons, with good benefits, then we think that this will disprove all of our arguments. So let's look at our first substantive argument, which is that this art is a valuable form of remembrance and confrontation. And there are two layers of this argument. First, we think that as they present it in their own framing, much of this art is not produced by contemporary thinkers, but the most controversial figures are historical figures, right? Art painted by imperialists like King Leo, or by Nazis and Nazi sympathizers, right? And we think this art is a very valuable part of that history, right? We think that truth never should rely on censor. If we want to understand the Holocaust, we should understand it in its entirety. And then essentially what team proposition stands to go down to is a form of historical revision. We won't look at this art because it might be painful to confront this history. What we say is that it is essential that we confront this history. It is essential that we do not avoid our history and our heritage simply because it is difficult to confront that heritage. We think that historical revisionism is extremely dangerous in any form, and that at its core, that's what this notion is about, cutting out part of history. Second of all, under this argument, we believe that it's very important for us to confront the nature of evil in all its forms. What we fundamentally think is that the reason we don't want to listen to art produced by people who've done terrible things is that at some level, we do not wish to acknowledge that we have anything in common with people who have committed these crimes, right? We do not wish to believe that we share anything with Hitler, right? We want Hitler to be as different from us as we possibly can make him. But that's very dangerous, because it is essential that we realize that the worst monsters are still human. We have to confront that we do share something with these people that commit atrocious crimes. It's important for us to acknowledge that someone can own slaves and produce beautiful works of poetry and fiction. And furthermore, we think that when you read these works, when you view these pieces, it is profoundly disturbing. It is profoundly moving to realize that you find the work of a mass murderer beautiful, right? That's disturbing. And we think that disturbance is important. We think it's profound, and we think it makes people think about evil and think about crime. And that is a very important thing if we want to avoid committing these acts in our own lives, and we want to learn to confront the legacy of these acts in the world around us. You cannot learn the truth through censorship, which is essentially what this motion is down to. Our second assumption, however, is that this is incredibly important for closure for victims. I'd like to point out that the entire proposition piece is about defending victims. So I want to explain to you here and now why this art is valuable for victims. There are two layers of that. Firstly, we think that this art is often valuable for catharsis stories. We think that purchasing the art, viewing the art of one who has abused you or committed a crime similar to one you have suffered, is a way for you to reassert your power, to have catharsis, right? We think that perhaps, I mean, in a few circumstances, but an example of this would be those who buy the art of Nazi Germany in order to burn it, right? To have some symbol of catharsis. They use this art as a way to confront what has happened to them, and that can be a deep form of closure that we think is worth talking about, and that same proposition dismisses out of hand. The second layer of post-mortem is we believe that fundamental in being a victim for men is an instinctive drive to understand. When you are a victim of a terrible crime, when your parents, when your friends, when those you care about are the victims of one who has committed an immoral act, you wish to, on some level, understand why. Why would someone ever do this? Why would someone do this to me and to my family? And we think that one of the ways we can do this is through art, through looking into the minds of those who committed these terrible acts. That's why African Americans go to the Slave Museum in Boston or to see the art of those who enslaved them. That's why Holocaust museums display the art of Nazi sympathizers. That's why people willingly read the diaries, purchase the art of those who abuse them and abuse their family, because it is a way for them to confront, to see, to understand, and to ultimately reach closure. What we think is that team proposition only thinks of one possible reason why people consume this art. But we tell you, people consume it to understand, to view history, and to reach closure. And we think those are all important elements, and that is why we approach this.
Now to see this proposition on bringing
French director Louis Duquesne was interviewed dozens of times after leaving the Oscars. Chris Brown still tweets every day and uses the publicity Rihanna's abuse doctrine to sell his own album. We think that artists commit atrocious crimes, but they have the reach, the exposure to influence society and normalize the worst of the evil. That's why we come to under the team line immoral artists of sadness and fear color the things themselves. They might also start to come to talk about this conversation and effects for society. But first, I have three things to cover. The first one is going to do with the first argument of opposition on historical awareness. Here they tell us that they want to remember the past, like the Holocaust. False assumption here in their arguments, however, that we can do so for other means. We think we would rather use Anne Frank's diary to learn about the Holocaust. We'd rather want to learn about the Jewish perspective. If we don't understand why in society, we should know why Hitler's plot was justified to kill 16 million Jews. Because we think that whatever his reasons were, they were wrong, and we don't want them in society. So they never gave us a reason why his point of view is so important. And we tell you that the other means are far more effective, which means that verifying the historical literature is wrong. And here they tell us that we are reforming history because they're now condemning a certain speech. And we say that's good, because we do want to go back, and we do want to tell Hitler that what he did was wrong, and that we don't expect in society. We want to accept that in our society today, that history of Hitler was wrong, and we want to accept opposition does, we think that that's sufficient. Second point of recall, on discussion, we really felt that it's important for discussion to have this process. We have two responses. We tell you, first of all, you don't want the type of discussion that we have to discuss about whether or not it was right for Chris Brown to beat up his girlfriend. We don't think it's discussion we want in our society, whether that was right or wrong, or whether he has the right to do so when even if he's a music artist. So we don't understand why discussion is even relevant in this case, because these are morally rejectable actions that shouldn't be discussed in our society because they're simply wrong. Second is, however, that even if we concede that we do want this discussion, which type of discussion, which form of discussion is more effective? Under our side of the house, you don't have Chris Brown that feels it all the attention because he's a popular. You have a girlfriend that he's abused, now speaking up, now becoming more popular. Because his idea and his platform is no longer allowed in society. We think that therefore our side is more effective in the discussion because it highlights the people that belong. We tell you that we want to focus on those people in the discussion, not on the people that did crimes themselves. Because we think that there's no sympathy in our society for those people. Which means that the type of discussion that opposition wants is a discussion that we reject because we think that it's morally wrong behavior. We don't want to discuss whether it is or it is not. Lastly, on victims. And here it gets interesting because they tell you that some victims are because they want to charge. So what they're saying here is that the art for the victims is so hurtful that the only way that they can live is by boarding up the art itself. We think that therefore they're conceding that this art isn't right for victims. Conceding a thing of the entire piece that it took this case. We tell you that if you want to burn that painting, you have to say you're happy to ban it for you and like unpaid things out until they're gone. We think that if you were the victim, they can so normalize the happiest things in society, we are happy to ban them. Because they can see that they prove that okay, that's great. And then secondly, they never responded to all the ways that all allies that are confronted by this and don't want to see it. Even if we give them the few people that want to see it on that regard, that is never rebuttal or engagement with all the other victims first whenever they see their Jewish forefather depicted as crimes. Because they need to analyze it with that piece of analysis. So, moving on to my own show, about why artists are role models and therefore normalize moral behavior. Before I go on to this.
The argument of art is always about celebrating the artist. African Americans don't view slavers' art because they're celebrating slavery. They're viewing this art to understand our heritage and confront it.
We think it's great if African Americans want to look at the art that we think that was created by an African American slave. We think that art is more powerful. We don't think that we should even pick a platform for people that exploited them for centuries, allowing them to gain a name, allowing them to gain fame by showing their art in museums and broadcasting it over the world. We tell you that those African Americans can still have the feeling of understanding their past without like bringing up people that hurt them. So why artists are role models and therefore normalize moral behavior? So why are artists so weird? See that artists, actors, actresses, and famous musicians are often have a huge background in society. Because even though we think our politicians and mayors are our own clubs, often these are the people who have millions of followers on Twitter that are on the news every day when they promote their videos, that are seen on the radio, that are heard on the radio, that are seen on television. Often these people are weird because they have an actual trait that will often be behind desire. I was a person, so I was a singer that I was that. I was a famous someday, so I would like to learn about people that are famous and I'd like to get back to artists. I like dancing, I like acting, that's why I like the actors and dancers, like dance the art. So sometimes our question is to explain why these artists that have such a big background, but I think it's intuitively clear that Justin Bieber has a huge background in the youth art society. It's clear that Chris Brown has no Twitter followers, which means that whatever he says and whatever he thinks directly gets resounded throughout society. Why is this problematic? We are not going to make a nuanced claim that this behavior, that now is the moral behavior we perceive as good. But what do we see is that these idols have committed crimes. And even though society did reject it officially and didn't have laws and punishment for it officially, the artist isn't punished enough. Or in some cases, not at all, like you saw in the French direct warrant event. You see that Chris Brown got away with minor charges because he had to, because the judges didn't want to have blood on their hands, convict him such an important and revere artists because they didn't know what to go against public opinion. We see that before, we see that often. These artists who then make white bad crimes, very white sentences for not at all. So what does this mean? It means that we send a signal to society that even though this behavior is deeply immoral, apparently it doesn't weigh up against the fact that we have so many bad and negative behavior. This means that people will start to see that immoral behavior as still wrong. What is mediated in some cases? For example, in our rap ethics. What is the influence? So when the first round beats up his girlfriend and gets minor punishment, it means that people in society don't see battery as that big a heartbeat. But more importantly, who are these people? Besides that, already in the case of the status quo, women have trouble reporting on domestic violence because they're afraid that others will get away from the judge. Because you will not be punished and you will come back to poverty. That means that if you think that in society there's a chance that your husband will go out free, you're less likely to step into this work and hurt your husband from domestic abuse. Besides that, if you show society that it's lenient to the most immoral behavior, the victims are less likely to step forward. This means that we have more bad behavior on our side. That means that new and old victims are continuously exposed to immoral behavior and society is not connected. Under our side, however, it is connected. The government is sending a clear signal that this abuse is wrong in all cases, no discussion necessary. And secondly, the artist will not have a platform to express it and thus get compromised. Therefore, we only protect the victims of the
Every single woman that Chris Down has abused, there are a million other women that society is unwilling to talk about. For every single orphan turned out of their homes because of a French movie, there are millions of other orphans that until people watched that movie, society didn't talk about. Side proposition believes that the only victims in today's round are the ones who've been directly the victims of those who've been in past atrocities and then painted art. But on side opposition, what we're going to tell you is that there is a broader perspective here. That by confronting the controversy within the artist's work, we can extrapolate that to the rest of society, examining the views that allow for rape, that allow for abuse. Side proposition tells us we shouldn't talk about rape because we intuitively know that it was wrong. But that is exactly the mentality that allows rape to continue as a societal function to this day. Because we are unwilling to talk about the abusers, because we're unwilling to accept that we, inside of ourselves, could one day transform into those monsters. And because we want to confront the controversy, we're very proud of those. I'm going to go over their argument, then our substantive points, then present our third substantive argument that will spark discussion and controversy. So first, on their first argument, they told you about how this praises the artist and downplays the act. Nothing. And then he gave you 4 responses that were entirely unaddressed by their second speaker. He told you that there are positive ways to consume this art. You can look at this art, listen to this music, and then have a discussion with your friend, or even within your own mind, about how, in listening to this music, you recognize the harms of this artist. You recognize that this artist has perpetrated wrongs, and it is horrible that you find pleasure in their work.
you reject the artist. The next thing that we told you, is that you can also be sensitive about how you view art, right? Your viewing this art does not necessarily have to harm others. We suggest that there are ways of consuming art that do not trigger others. For instance, we find it entirely acceptable for you to put a trigger warning before every single Chris Brown song to let people know who might be triggered and experience dramatic psychological stress that maybe if they feel that they should get out of them, then they should get out of it. We think it's quite clear and easy. You can still consume art. In their second point, they talk about how this hurts victims. And their classic example is this French movie, which turned orphans out of their homes. But that's exactly the point. Those orphans being turned out of their homes even before this movie was produced. Because under the French system, the government hardly cares about building public orphanages. The reason that we are having this discussion in this debate round is because we watched this movie. Because we understand now that people do abuse orphans in this way. We recognize that for our own entertainment, people do commit horrible crimes. And because of this, we're able to reject future films that they recommend, reject future instances of that abuse. Then in the third argument, it talks about normalization. Now, what we tell you is, every single time that Chris Brown is mentioned in the newspapers, mentioned in the media, his name has been eternalized as an abuser of rape. We think that it's extremely important to recognize that these people aren't immediately forgotten, right? We accept that Chris Brown has millions of Twitter followers, but we recognize that society on the whole recognizes his abuses and questions what their own values, committing to not commit the same types of abuses in the future. Now, on to our first two substantive arguments. Our first argument was about remembering history, and they did three objections. The first is, they said, read Diaries of Anne Frank, not Hitler's work. We say you should probably read the Diaries of Anne Frank as well to gain a comprehensive historical perspective. Then the next thing they say is, well, Hitler's view is entirely irrelevant, we shouldn't care about it at all. But that's exactly what every single mass murderer since the 1940s has told themselves. The Bosnian Serbs believed they were different when they were massacring people in Srebrenica. Every single mass murderer in history has looked at themselves and said, you know, maybe this cause is righteous. But when people view the artwork, they recognize inside of themselves they could be painting that artwork. They could be a mass murderer. And we think that's incredibly important, because to recognize evil inside of yourself, you must recognize that all humans have evil within themselves. Yes.
Why wouldn't you think of a Nazi artist to understand that Hitler was bad and what he did was wrong?
Because, as I was about to explain, media depictions of Hitler outside of his artwork don't humanize him. Movies like Downfall and Valkyrie portray him as a psychotic mass murderer, because that's what appeals to the common psyche. But that's exactly the problem. The common psyche doesn't realize that anyone can become Hitler. Anyone can become a mass murderer. Many men believe that they are not actually abusing their wives when they hit them. And because of this, we recognize that when we do this art, we see there is a human on the other side, and see that that human could easily be us. The third problem they pointed out was that these should be discussed at all. But we tell you, these are problems that exist outside of Chris Brown and French movies. There are millions of victims that go entirely unaddressed on their side of the house, because people aren't even aware of these problems. In our second point, we talked about closure, and they had two objections. The first is, well, if you recognize that people want to burn the art, then you should just not do it at all. No, our point was that the actions that have been done to victims are harmful, and that in order to find a sense of personal closure, they are burning a depiction of the self-image of the artist who painted it. It is a form of personal closure, not an act of destruction. Now, the second objection they had is, people should view museums in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. about the Holocaust, because it hurts all people. No, the reason that these museums have paintings created by Hitler, the reason they have artwork like the Nazi flag, is because we remember these people with infamy for eternity. We recognize that there are millions of victims who could yet be the victims of these ideologies, and we say, by viewing this, we reject this in their entirety. We help to prevent the potentiality of these victims. Now, our third argument, about how this sparks discussion. Now, we recognize there will be significant controversy whenever anyone views this artwork. But before we go on, yes.
So whenever we abandon the status quo or in the future a piece of art, don't you think that that's what starts the controversy and discussion in the war?
Not at all, because when you ban it, you get rid of it. You can't possibly have a discussion about the art, its human elements, if you can't actually view the artwork at all. In fact, in your model, you didn't even say that there was a ban, so I think you'll need to work at that little bit of narrative tension during the talk. Now, we think that when you view this artwork, it forces you to confront controversy. So as an example, recently, Bill Cosby was accused by 39 women of committing atrocious rapes. This was an uncomfortable discussion, but many people found that when they watched the Bill Cosby show again, they recognized that they could become Bill Cosby. Now, the African American community in the United States was uncomfortable with the idea of a black man being portrayed as a sexual predator. But by watching Bill Cosby, there is internal dialogue within the community that, perhaps this is a problem. We need to address this issue. And we think that this extrapolates out to other points of discussion, like social media and the news. We think that their example of Chris Brown actually works very well against it. Because Chris Brown, when he first used Rihanna, the focus wasn't, oh, let's wait until his next album because we love him so much. Instead, the discussion was, how could a member of our community that we adored and respected commit such an abuse? And that's what happens every single time that he releases his album. Now, we think that this is also capable of creating other discussions. Let me give you a hypothetical example. If an art museum in New York created an art gallery with art painted by convicted rapists, we think this would create a massive discussion in our society that even the worst among us are still capable of creating beauty, and that even the worst among us are still humans. We think that by sparking sort of controversy, we can help to eliminate and fight on a societal level all of the problems the proposition is so concerned about. On our side of the house, we stand for the full, uncensored truth, because although it is uncomfortable to confront, it is necessary to confront. Celebrities might have committed crimes, but we recognize that there are millions of victims whose names are unknown and whose abusers have not been put out onto the light. By watching this artwork, we recognize that, and we recognize that we can help these people. We're very proud to about
Make no mistake with opposition. When they tell you that this art makes us wonder how such a person can ever be a member of our community, they completely forgo the fact that these artists are famous, are revered, just get away with the moral act that they have done. And the intentional type of opposition is that hurts. It hurts to see that an artist that has hurt you is revered, is famous, and isn't brought to justice by modern society for what he's done. And that is exactly why we have in today puts together the team line that moral artists evoke sadness and fear, color, and things of the future. In my speech, I'm going to address this by talking about three classes. I'm going to talk about the proper use of art and how this is impossible for self. I'm going to talk about discussion and how there are side of the house that's moral offensive. Lastly, I'm going to quickly talk about culture and how we provide that better and more quickly to the doing that, I hope it persuaded you that we should not give these people a place, space in society. Let me go to my first class. Only four views of art, no very much. What they said is there are other uses of art. There are, for example, people who can display in textbooks or museums. That completely fails to recognize this spillover effect that we already pointed out in their speech. It is the assumption under side opposition to following that your proper use of art is limited to your use and that you have control over what happens to the art of that art piece. Note the following reaction. Your use, even if you use it appropriately and sensitively, for example, if you have a trigger warning before Chris Brown himself, gives attention to that artist and to that work. The fact that even with a trigger warning, you show Chris Brown's song means that people get to know Chris Brown and himself and potentially like that and will show it as their work. So that means that that art will be used in other places because you use it in a sensible way. Those are the places where you have no control over. You don't know if people are going to do it because of themselves. You don't know if people are going to do it. What does that mean? That means that even if you try to use it sensibly, not to hurt others, you are complicit in causing harm to others. Because other people are going to show you in a way that is offensive. That means that you cannot isolate that harm. That means that you're still causing that harm. Therefore, it fails. But even by using it sensibly, you're complicit in that tremendous harm that you're causing.
Yes, you continue to assume that the only reason people consume art is to glorify the artist. You challenge this assumption since the beginning speech, and you haven't addressed our other motivations we consistently brought up.
The problem is, this is regardless of whether people consume art to glorify the person or not. You believe the fact that Chris Brown has, all of themselves of millions and billions of copies, that in itself glorifies it. This is a consumption that in the end leads to the fame of that person, that leads to glorification in itself. We don't think that people glorify it and that's why they consume it. It's sort of the other way around, something that people from force speech onwards and never react to other than that trauma of our opinions. Going on to the second class about discussion and effects. So we tell you in this class, and even if discussion works for you, it does never fail against her. Because in the end, we are going to try to have this discussion in order to recognize that this person was inhumane and to try to talk about how bad that person was. So here I'll prove that the discussion is more offensive than what I'm saying about, then we take this point, because then we're not protecting victims, we're not sparking the good kind of discussion that we want, as they say. So why don't we? What they said was that it sparks discussion and it confirms you in enough disclosure. There is an inherent problem with the relation between the victim and the perpetrator in this sense. We tell you that the victim is always less powerful than the perpetrator of the moral act. We, of course, already analyze how artists are revered, how they're famous. We said, for example, how Justin Bieber has an enormous fan. What does that mean? That means that when Justin Bieber visited Anne Frank house in Amsterdam and he made an offensive comment about Anne Frank, this was sanctioned by the Anne Frank house. Rather, you got millions of tweets of believers who told them who told the Anne Frank house to leave him alone, and he was just making a random comment that it didn't mean anything. To tell you that if you as a victim try to stand up to that person, if you as Rihanna try to tell that you were systematically abused by Chris Brown, that means that you're going to be told that you're holding him back, that you're jealous of him, that you're not taking into consideration his circumstances. We believe this discussion always works. It's also easier for art to be legitimized and being bad. This is something that is incredibly offensive to you. But moreover, it is not the kind of discussion that we want. This is constantly in defense of that person. Having said that, we believe that the discussion is more offensive than that. It doesn't provide the kind of narrative that we want, namely the narrative that never legitimizes that person, the narrative where not millions of people coming to the defense of a person who did something heinous. But in the end, this debate is going to be adjudicated on victims and where they find forward the best. In my previous classes, I've told you how the discussion is not the way how it's like, it's to legitimize the person. And I've also told you how we cannot self-defense from happening even if it's done in a sensible way. Now, the only thing that is left is opposition to the contention of you need to be able to understand why the person is. We told you from the beginning that there are other ways of doing so. We believe that they are just as effective. We believe that in considering the Holocaust, it's important to know what kind of suffering that was upon the Jews, what kind of suffering that was upon Roman people. We believe that there are more reactions to their case. The first reaction is that we sincerely still don't understand why it is necessary to know that Hitler became useful act well, but to understand why he did the Holocaust. We sincerely don't understand that reaction. We think that and that's our second reaction, you don't want people to see that there is a human behind. You don't want people to see, well, Hitler also has sensitive feelings. We don't want people to understand that and possibly appreciate the art that a person like that committed. We believe that that is something that again legitimate. We believe that art exposure, we believe that is something that needs to be done. Yes, sir.
Your attitude is exactly the problem we're trying to solve. Your insistent rejection to see anything human about mass murders is exactly why every murderer thinks they are different.
That is exactly the case, right? We think that we should not see anything human about mass murder. We think that the fact that you see mass murder, you may perpetrate that image, means that you're less powerful in the way that you reject this act. That means that people who might support it still have those ideas. We think that that is very problematic. Moreover, we really for those human those victims, we now see that he is not only being remembered by society for all those horrible things that he did, but that we're distracting attention to something else. We believe that for victims it is incredibly important to remember that. That is why, for example, the Netherlands, all through the Orwell days about the Second World War, we remember that from the perspective of survivors of the Holocaust or victims of the Holocaust, because that is something that brings closure to victims. We do that at our hearts, because we don't have that revering of people, we don't have the legitimization of these people or the. Now, at the end of this debate, what should you take away from this? We believe that there are a couple of things. First of all, we don't want people to legitimize mass murderers or people who did horrible things. This is something that you inherently do outside opposition. Because consuming art means that these people get famous, means that they get positive attention, something that legitimizes their acts. Under our side, that doesn't work. Under our side, we have a discussion that is less offensive. Moreover, under our side of the house, we have more closure because we're remembering it from their perspective. And that is why, at the end of the day, I'm very happy to tell you that the moral artists for Sadness and Fear following in this debate. Thank you very much.
And now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon 70 seconds.
People who are like family men or who are not individuals who are normal individuals
mask the way in which these individuals can actually perpetuate more crime. When we come to grips about these conversations, when we talk about these issues, we can prevent more victims from happening in the future. We give you the example of Bill Cosby. He was viewed as a family man because of the Cosby Show. However, once we were able to confront the truth, we recognized that there are many victims who are not talked about. The only way that we can talk about victimization of individuals is if we actually talk about these individuals. The way in which we do that is by confronting the truth, and we believe principally that issue falls to our side of the house. But let's look onto the second point. How exactly are we going to help victims? They currently have this type of idea where we're only talking about people like Chris Brown and Justin Bieber. But we tell you that we have to look at the majority of instances. It's not just about pop culture. It's about art. It's about visual art. It's about paintings. It's about poetry. It's about literature. It's about movies. It's about historical ways in which individuals can allow for victims to be heard. On our side of the house, we tell you that the best way in which these victims are going to be able to come to grips with the oppression that they're facing is if they have things like closure. When African Americans go to museums talking about slavery, they don't only want to see the art painted by a black slave. They want to see why would someone commit this atrocity in the first place? Why would someone uproot a group of individuals from their home, bring them to America, strip them of their language, strip them of their culture, and take away their ability to have some sort of identity? If we are able to rob these individuals of the closure or the access or connection to the history that they have, we are actually creating more victims. And that's why we're going to do it.
Eventually, in historical autobiography, victims speak out about the act that occurred and also give the same information about their things.
Okay, when you speak out about an issue, that issue kind of has to be on display, right? There's no way in which individuals can talk about the raping of individuals. There's no way in which they can talk about domestic abuse if there is not a clear individual who is displaying it either in their art or behind the scenes of their art. We're saying that it puts it more on display. Jasper, at the beginning of his speech, talked about how for every orphan that you say is victimized by the film penalty, there are millions of other orphans who are not talked about. There are millions of other individuals whose narratives never come to light in the world aside competition because you take away the ability for individuals to consume the art. We're saying that the consumption of art is not just enjoying things for entertainment. We're saying that is actually a very monolithic view of what it means to consume things. Individuals consume things for pleasure. Individuals consume things for understanding. Individuals consume things in order to understand why certain aspects are happening. We also tell you that it allows for catharsis. It allows for some physical empowerment. They have this idea that victims are less powerful than their oppressors. However, when these victims burn the pictures that Nazi enthusiasts actually painted that harm their families, in that moment, they have a sense of power. We're saying that it's not always about the abuser, but how the victim feels in that situation. How the victim feels to be holding that art that some Nazi enthusiast took time to prepare and destroy it with their own bare hands. When we're able to do this, it allows for individuals to have some certain type of power and be able to control what's happening. With that being said, let's look at our third class. In class, we talk about how discussion is lit at the level of the victim, but we already talked about how victims are actually benefiting more on our side. But if anything, we have to look at the larger impact that we have on discussion. Not only are we coming to grips that we might be as a monster, but we're also able to spark discussion. We can go back to the example of Bill Cosby. When people recognized it, it created a lot of movements to have people either sign petitions, go on change.org to have things change, have individuals talk about ways in which they can combat things like abuse, combat things like rape, combat things like the manipulation of drugs to abuse certain women in order to be able to solve this problem. They're saying that discussions are not good, but discussions are the only way in which we come about strategies to deal with issues in the first place. On our side of the house, we're saying that we have to look at the bigger picture. When we allow for discussion, not only are you talking to your peer and saying, wow, what they did was messed up. Wow, Chris Brown, even though he's releasing his album, also abused of Rihanna. We are saying that it sparks movements that allow for individuals to come to grips with this, spark movements that allow individuals to fight back against this power and bring it to the limelight. Every time we talk about Chris Brown, even in the context of the debate, it always goes back to the fact that he created some type of abuse. When we recognize that individuals are abusers, it's very difficult to isolate from their art. And as a result, viewing their art allows for us to have a direct passage to combating the problems that are associated with that artist, as well as the problems that they have created. As a result, we're saying on our side of the house, we're showing you that confronting the going to be a better way in which to not only protect victims, but help society in general. We're also telling you why it's uniquely important to combat people such as in the future, and we're also showing you why it's better to allow the victim to have power and that focus. And for those reasons, we're proud of you.
Listening to Chris Brown's music doesn't feel good. Talking about rapists doesn't feel good. It's not easy, it's painful, and it's hard. But so are all the most important things for us to confront. I sympathize with the stance of proposition. I sympathize with the instinct not to look at ugly things. I sympathize with the desire not to talk about the difficult parts of our lives. But we must if we want to end them. And that is why we oppose. In this speech, I'll be looking at the two key areas of this debate. First, the value of truth. And second of all, who helps victims and discussion. But let us begin with the principle clash between we who stand for truth in all of its forms and the proposition who wishes to simply avoid those parts of the truth they find disturbing. I understand where proposition comes from, right? We instinctively don't want to look at Hitler's art. We don't want to listen to the poetry of imperialism. We don't want to think of them as human. And that's why they get up in their speeches and say, good, let's not think of Hitler as human. Let's not think of imperialism as human. The problem is that's what leads us to not think of rapists as human. And this is why that is wrong. When you say a rapist, a murderer, that's a monster. But I'm a human. So I could never do those things. And that is the logic that leads people to commit atrocities without realizing they are such. We must confront that these people are like us. We must confront the good with the bad, because every conversation has two sides, and let you only listen to half. Although that might make you feel better, although it might be easier, it's not the truth. And the truth is what we need if we wish to make things better. And we've never heard any genuine response from proposition about these dangers. All they say is good. Yes, let's not talk about it. Let's not realize he's a human. They told you why that's wrong, and proposition has never once given you a genuine response. But this is related to the second key issue of this round, which is who best protects victims and creates discussion. What I would like to point out is that the explicit advocacy of team proposition is let's talk about crimes, but let's only talk about the victims. And I say that that is wrong. It might be easier, it might feel better not to talk about the murderer, and in their words, because the victim is less powerful. But we think that that half discussion is not enough of a discussion, because we must confront who commits these crimes, along with who suffers from these crimes, right? It's important for us to listen to these victims, give them a chance, to give them a conversation. But part of that conversation must be the attempt to understand the mind of one who commits these atrocities. That's why it's important for us to watch Bill Cosby, to ask how a beloved figure could also be a rapist, right? To confront those figures in our society and to understand that the things that make us happy can also be the things that are dangerous to us. And they simply refuse to confront that truth because it's easier. And secondly, what we tell you is that these victims themselves seek out misunderstanding. There's a reason why Black Americans look at the art of slavery. There's a reason why Holocaust memorials have Nazi art. And what Team Proposition says is, well, we just don't think it's important. We don't think they need it. We think they can get it somewhere else. And I challenge them to say that to those sitting right across the room from them who have suffered these tragedies, who are descended from those, who are connected to these ideas. What we see is that victims find catharsis, victims find meaning. Art is a way of confronting those who make that art. And it is that confrontation that saves the victim. It is that confrontation that creates the conversation. And Team Proposition wants to run from that confrontation because it doesn't feel. We stand for the victim and we stand for the truth. And that is why we end.
What was the debate about? It was about victims. Because even the U.S. would expect current victims from closure and future victims from discussion. And we think to best protect victims is we protect them from all the memories and outweigh their hurt. And that's why we came together with a team like Aurora artists who both sadness and fear for In this reply speech, I want to ask two questions. First of all, on which side are victims feel most? Second of all, which side should we get the discussion? So let's use emerging victims. And what we told you here was that they downplay the harm and get up the memories of immoral acts. And the only real response we get is that there can be a different consumption of art, which is not glorifying these acts. We have two responses to this throughout the entire event. The first, a very important one, taking silence, which is that it doesn't matter in which way you consume it. You should always come and know it and give attention to the artist in the way. Because for someone outside looking at someone who's listening to the song, he doesn't know it. We think therefore it didn't matter in which way you consumed it. There's a silence analysis here. But second of all, we did multiple reasons to believe by the word we is being a journal discussion when you listen to the first round. The first one was that there's actually data to make over time because people focus on this music again after several years. The second one was because people, when focusing on consumption, enjoy the moment. And if you rash at that moment, don't think about what is happening behind that picture, then we have future over time. The last response we gave was and almost never jumped by their side by explaining that we glorify artists in this way. They're glorifying throughout the entire world. And that's why examples like Justin Bieber in the unemployment laws was so important. Because there wasn't this internal discussion about whether it was wrong or what it was the case. It was his followers standing up there and saying that he was always going to be right. No matter the reason why, because they were believers and they were always supporting him. So never was this discussion they wanted to talk about. But the only thing they said about working victims also was closure. And the reason they gave for this was that they understand the reasons of why someone did this crime. We think that there are other ways and resources of these. We take, for example, historical journals, how to be biographies, which can give you an understanding of the life of an individual and why he did that. Importantly, there was never a big analysis by looking at art, seeing colors, and then also understanding why someone did that. We never heard that be an essential thing, and therefore that argument. But let's secondly talk about their impact on discussion. So, they said the discussion was important to see the human side, and we gave you three responses. again, what we told you was that there are other ways to see the human side of this. I don't see why it's necessarily to look at a creativity of a Nazi German, when there are other historical journalists out there lives for anyone who can see that there are things which are similar to you and them, but we don't think that art is the way to do so. But second of all, what we told you here is that the reason you care about discussion is about the further immoral acts in the future. And what's important to notice here is that Willie brought a very important substantive for you, explaining why those immoral acts are more likely to go unpunished. Where they're more likely to go unpunished in every single case because they are glorified. There was never a real response to this. Even if you believe the metric of, well, future acts, we gave you the big substantive point to agree with that. Because we think that it's not just paintings, we think there are other things which are in the We don't think, furthermore, that what they said about what you can see the human side of this is going to happen for the reasons I already told you that the discussion doesn't happen, right? And they gave the reasons why the discussion doesn't happen. Given that discussion doesn't happen, you also don't go to the internal structure of minds and artists. You will listen to this Brown song. We simply think that didn't happen on Gerson House, and you never responded to those reasons. We think victims of self-defense. Millions of people, not just women and people who are offended by this now, every single one who suffers from abuse is hurt by even being able to produce a song which should turn a by total multiple.
We also like to thank our opponents and our judges, and especially our audience. This format is really at its core about having a debate that people can watch and understand and think about. And having people come to watch us is by far the biggest honor and compliment we can receive. So thank you very sincerely for being here, and I hope this was interesting for you.